Emily, oder? Mein Screen seht ihr schon, oder? Ja. Ist das hier lesbar? Größer, kleinerer? Wie wollt ihr es? Ja, 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 ja. Also remember that it's in English, so do the moderation in English. I guess we will wait until like 5 minutes after, and then we start. I think it's already 22 people here. How many signed up? Like 23 something? I don't know. I have no idea why it's double. It's basically just a presentation, maybe. Like I'm in there, my presentation is in there. I'm not sure how it works. Do you see my camera, by the way? Hello? Ah, okay. See both? Nice. Also, I hate giving talks in German because it's English anyway, and it feels so super weird. Yeah, also good to keep your English, intact. Nice training. Yep. Thanks, Victor. Yeah, welcome to my talk. This is about React basics and state management. My name is Kevin. I'm a full stack developer since about 2008, but my focus has always been more to the front end side of things. And I've been using React since the mid 2014s, which was about version 0.12 or something like that. I'm not quite exactly sure, but it's a long time ago. Before that, I used all the fancy stuff that web dev had, like jQuery modules, Backbone, Angular. But yeah, we don't talk about those stuff anymore, right? It's in the past. It's gone. Um, I used React to create SharePoint apps and add-ins, also Outlook add-ins I did with React, just normal web applications and progressive web apps. And static sites you can do with React too. There are some cool tools for that, and my personal site is made with React too. Something else about myself, like I have a cat. Also, I will be very sorry if he starts meowing during the talk because he hurt himself yesterday and he's under house arrest and he's not very happy about the situation. So if there's a lot of meowing, I'm sorry about that. Currently he's sleeping, so it should be fine. Yeah, I like climbing, gaming, and this is retro wave, like the music and stuff. If you look at my website, you know what it means. Um, Also, this meetup will be recorded, just so you know. If you don't want to be heard or whatever, just don't say anything. But I hope everyone is cool with that. All right, nice. So short agenda for the talk today. Well, the introduction we already did. This is the agenda. Part one will be we will try to re-implement React from scratch without anything else. And by doing that, we are learning more about React, right? So this is not your basic Hello World React example. This is a bit something different, but I hope you all like it. This part is inspired by a talk of Tejas Kumar, which is called Inside React, a deeper look. You can have a look at this talk too if you want later. It's really good. After that, I think we should probably do a short break and then like 5 to 10 minutes. Then part two will be about state handling in React apps, different types of state, how to implement them, what tools are available. And this part is inspired by another talk from Kenzie Dodds. I guess a lot of people heard from him. He's very famous in the React community. And the talk was named Managing React Application State Managing. So this is basically about managing state management, which is kind of funny. Yeah, then we can do another short break and some questions and discussion in the end if people want to stick around. I have no idea how long this will take. We will just go with it. Cool. So yeah, that's all about for the slides. We just start coding, I guess, and implement some React. So for that, now we can delete this. I have like an empty folder here, right? There's nothing in it. I will just do npm init. Say yes to everything. Don't really care. I will add TypeScript to the project and parser for bundling. That's basically all the dependencies we want. TypeScript is cool. Some people don't want to use it in talks. I want to use it because it helps. So this will take a few moments. While this is loading, we can also start writing like an index HTML already. Well, that didn't work. Something like this. We need our script tag, which will be index.tsx. That's it. We also need like a root container, something like this. Yeah, this won't work. All right, nice. So this is basically like every Hello World React app that you see. It probably has a HTML file that looks like this. So we also want our index TypeScript file, and we will also init our TypeScript config. Oh, why is this not working? Right. Oh, actually, I should probably. Is this actually readable? Someone, maybe this is better. Cool. Yeah. Just one thing we need to enable here, which is JSX, which is like the syntax we used to write. Lowercase. Yeah, used to write our views. And another thing for talks, which is nice, is implicit any. Where is it? Here. We will set this to false. So we can, like, we don't want to use, well, don't want to write too much typing during our dev talk. So disable this, and I guess we're good to go. So, well, we can just start by saying like, oh, maybe actually we should see if it actually works. So we go parcel. For those who don't know, parcel is just a bundler like a Webpack, but it has like 0 configuration. And for prototyping stuff, it's really, really good. You can also use it in production, but we're not doing this here. Okay, looks like nothing's happening, no errors. It's always good. Nice. Okay, so we can start. Yeah. Yeah, if you want to use JSX, like the syntax, which we will see in a second, you should name your files TSX. You technically don't need to do that, but it's just a convention in the community, so you should do it. Also, if you use JavaScript instead of TypeScript, you use JSX instead of TSX. Yeah, and speaking of JSX, well, we will start by writing a simple component. This is like a wrapper div. We will have some header tag. All right. Oops. Maybe we want some text here too. Oh. Okay. All right. So this is basically just a single, simple React component. We could also add something like a class name here to style it later. Why is my, okay. Yeah, this is already my editor being too smart. And then, like, if you want to render your React to the browser, there's a library called React DOM, which renders your React into the browser. If you want to do native, then you have to use React Native instead, or there are some other weird React renderers that render into the shell, for example. But don't want to talk about this here. So we do this, and we want to render it into our root container that we did earlier. All right, so if we start this, our browser, do this a bit bigger. Okay, our browser tells us, well, React DOM is not defined. So yeah, well, we are not using any libraries, so it's not too unlikely. So we do this. What? Why is it not? Nice. Already, talk is over. Sorry, guys. Why is it? No. Oh, I have to do const here. Yeah, I'm dumb. Sorry, write coding. All right, so now the browser is at least happy about the React part, the React DOM part, right? But now it wants to see a constant which is named React. And well, we don't really use React here anywhere, right? But where this React comes from is basically this JSX is translated into function calls by the JSX transpiler. And those function calls are bound to basically the React. That's what we configured here, right? It says JS use React to create your elements and stuff like that. So let's do the same here. We will just do React. And now it wants a function which is called create element. Well, okay, then let's define this, see where we go. No, please. All right, so now he's basically happy again, but nothing's happening because we had no implementation, right? So let's start by seeing or checking what for arguments we are getting here. So we see that we get two arguments. One is a function, and the second parameter is null. So, okay. Now we can do like fn is the first argument, right? And we just call it, I guess. It's a function. Let's see what happens. Okay, now we see that React wants to create another element where the first part is actually h1 and not a function anymore. So this looks like it tries to do something with this line here, right? So I guess this is either a function or a tag. And if fn, oh, typo. So if fn or tag, sorry. It's actually a function. We want to call it again. Maybe return it. And well, if it's just a tag, we want to return just the tag, which is so yeah, this is actually a tag by this point, right? Because it's not a function, so it's a tag. All right, now it looks better, I guess. You can see no more errors. We get 4 elements here, or 4 logs, and we basically have like 4 components, right? App, h1, p, and the wrapper div. So this looks like it's kind of working, but we still want to have like a shadow DOM or virtual DOM, how it's called in React, where we basically want to have like the hierarchical structure that we have here, we want to have in our JavaScript object too. So we need to work on that. Also, we see that we get more arguments here, right? So this is still null everything. Here it's actually class name, which we used here. So this looks like it's props, right? So all of our properties. So we can do this. This is props, and then the third and the fourth children look like, or the third and the fourth properties or arguments here look like they are children, right? So like for our p here, the third parameter is this text block. And for our div, the third and fourth is basically the h1 and the p. So everything that comes after the props is probably something like children. Yeah. This is version 0.0.1. There is no React in here. We are implementing it ourselves. There is no, like, we have no dependencies, right? There is no React in this project. We are writing it ourselves to learn how it works. So, yeah. All right. So when we call this function, we might want to pass the props here. Also, we want to return like the props, and we want to add the children to our props here too. So now, right, it's still working. Let's see what we are actually getting to render now. This is not create element. This is React element. Right. So this is actually what we are getting now into our render function. It starts with a div at the top level. which has a class name. And the children are two more elements, right? The first one is the h1, the second one is the paragraph. And this also has children again, and which is the text block, basically. So it looks like we have some kind of working virtual DOM in our project at the moment. So nice. This is not a lot of code, and we basically parsed whatever comes out of here. Nice. And now we can use this to basically render our elements into the DOM, right? So what we are doing here, well, let's start by saying that our element, or actually we have a second parameter here, which is the root element, right, that we get. And when we render something, we want to create like a new element in the DOM. And what kind of is, and we basically want to have the tag from the React element that we want to render. So a div or h1 or p, we want to use that tag to create the element in the DOM, right? Then we need the HTML attributes, which is basically just the props of the element we want to render, or like an empty object. Then we want the attribute keys, which is just like all the attributes except for children, because children is a bit special, right? We don't want to have this as an HTML attribute. Oops. All right. And then our children are basically attributes.children or empty array. All right, and now we want to add all the attributes to our HTML element. And we do this by just simply iterating over all the keys and then setting it on the element, which is attributes key. Nice. And now, you know, like recursively rendering all the children is probably also a good idea. No, don't do this. Thanks. So this is a child. And we just say, okay, React DOM, render my child. And now, like, we don't want to pass the root element here again because, you know, it's hierarchical. So we wanted to add this children actually to the element and not to the root element. And well, when we are done with all the rendering, we just append our, it's called root element. Yeah, just append it. All right. And now we see that nothing is happening. Nice. Live coding. Oh, actually, it does something. Oops. Nice. Okay, so you can see it actually renders at least the div and the h1 and the paragraph, right? But this undefined is probably not what we want. We want like some text right here. So we have to have some edge cases or handle some edge cases, I guess, which is, so if type of React element is just a string, or maybe it could also be like a number. We just want to add it directly onto the root element as a text node. So document type create text node element, and we probably want to cast this to a string if it's a number. And we're good. And now, ta-da, we actually render some React onto our browser. So, you know, this is like nice and all, but like the big selling point about React is that, you know, like your UIs get interactive, right? This is just static data. There's nothing happening. You cannot change anything. It's just there. Probably a simple HTML file would have been enough to do the same. But this is probably a bit overkill. So let's probably add some inputs, right? Where we can change stuff. Where do we add it? Yes, we add it here. So we want an input here. Type can be number. This should work out of the box, right? We can like add numbers here, but nothing is happening, right? So how do we do that? First thing is that we need some variables to hold our values. So we add this to our main component. And the way this is done with native React tools is something to use, which is called useState. And the way this works is basically, well, we want size, for example, and a setter. And this state and the default value is 300. So what we're doing here is basically we tell React to have like, we want to use some state in our component. And the default value is 300. The variable is named size. And if we want to change this value, we need to call the setSize method, right? And we can do value size here. So now it should, well, I guess we need to implement useState first for ourselves, which is not that hard actually. So we have an initial state value here. And what we want to do is have some state, which is initially like the initial state. And we want a setState function, which, second, yeah, which takes as a parameter like your new state. And what it does is basically just mutate the state with new state. And then this returns the state and the set state as a tuple and as a constant tuple. Right. So now, looks like something is working at least. This is now 300. If you want to change the value, it actually works, but this is not like our size is currently not updated, right? So if I lock this here, oh, actually, well, the app doesn't get re-rendered, and like we don't set the size at the moment. This is just the value in the DOM. This is different. So we need to, add like an unchanged event handler, and this gets an event, and we want to do like set size with the value of the target, right? And maybe we want to do an alert first, see if it's actually working. So if we change it now, well, it's still not working. Why is that? Because actually the onChange with a capital C is a React thingy. If you want to do it directly on the DOM, you have to do it with a lowercase c. So now we see that the onChange handler is at least working, and it tells us the new value, which is nice. So now we can do something like that. No. Okay, and oh yeah, also we want to show basically our size somewhere in the DOM, right? So we can just do something like that. And now, even though we updated, well, the value still isn't updated because there's no re-render, right? We are not re-rendering anything. It's rendered once, and then we can, change some values here, but it's only updated directly on the DOM, not in our code. So we need a way to basically re-render the app on every state change, which is also what React does, but just in a smarter way. We will do the poor man's implementation here. So instead of this, we will do like a small render function. basically just calls the rect DOM render. And now every time we set our state, we want to render again. And we want to render once in the beginning, right? So nice. So now if I change the value, well, it's still not working, but it renders at least the stuff again. So maybe we fix this. We fix this first. How do we do that? Well, we just need to just clear our children, right? So we take this, do it into a constant, which is basically our root. This should be here. And then, you know, if this one has a first child already, then we just remove it. Right, we render again. Now we change the value, and at least the value isn't changing anymore. Like it doesn't go up, right? Because it gets set to 300 again and again. And yeah, which is probably a bit weird because, you know, we want to change it here, right? So what's happening? We can actually like add some log statements maybe. Let us debug. Maybe here. So what's happening now is we see that our state, our initial state gets called with 300, and where's the other? It's too much output. Wait a second. Gonna clear some stuff here. This can go. Oh, this should be new state. Sorry. Okay, now we're good. So if we call use state, we see that initial state is always 300, right? It doesn't change, and but we get the new value basically here, which is 301 instead of 300. So it's kind of working, but it's not. And that is because, like on every render, we call this function, right? And it just sets the value in the function scopes back to 300. So what we need to do to fix this is basically have our state, which is here, be global. And this is like null in the beginning. And here we can say state is actually our initial state if it's not already set. So basically we just initialize this to this default value if it's not already set. And now, look at that, it's actually working. Yeah, it is. The control is just a bit weird. I don't know why. But yeah, it's working. So now we have user interaction in our app here, which is nice. Now there's one thing. Yeah. Yeah, we will talk about this later. So basically, like, you don't, like, this is not something you need to do on your actual React app. We will see this later. This is just our try to you know, mimic the re-render that React does when state changes. So basically what we are doing is basically just render the whole app again into the DOM. Don't care about if you only need to render parts of it or whatever. React is, of course, smarter about that. We will see this later. But at the moment, if any state changes, just throw everything away, re-render it, and you're good. It's not really performant, but I mean, it's 80 lines of code. I guess React has a few lines more. So, but we will get there. We will get there. This is just so that you know how it actually works. All right. So since I like cats, we can also, like, you know, render some cat pictures here. It's always nice how people like cats. So we want to actually do, oops, do it like that and interpolate this and this. So, all right, now we have cat images, and if we change the size, we get other cats. All right, so the only issue here is that, they're all rectangular. Maybe we want like another input and change it to width and height or something like that. So we can update these values separately. So we want to have like more state, which is like have now and set have. And this is width and set width. Let's do big. Let's do another. Yeah, that's good. I see it. All right. We can still log our values here. I guess that's fine. So now we have like two inputs, right? And one is for the width. The other one is for the height. We don't need this anymore. And now we basically want a different width and a different height, right? So now, oh, this looks a bit ugly. Yeah, that's better. Maybe we add something like width, height. Yeah, that's nice. So now we actually introduced like another bug. It's kind of funny. You can see that if I change one value, the other one changes too, right? Which is not what we want. It also works if I change it here, it changes the width. So what's the issue now? Well, our state is basically one global variable, right? And every use state accesses this one global variable and it overrides itself each time. So probably this is not a good data model for our state. So maybe we should try something better, which is an array. So we want two values, right? So maybe array works. And what you basically need to do is we need to keep track of where in the array we are. So we also need like some kind of state pointer, just 0 in the beginning. And every time we use state, we want a local copy of that value, which is like local pointer state pointer. And now when we set state, we don't want to replace the whole state. Also, when we want to initialize it, we want to initialize the value at this exact position. 1 second. So our local state is basically, oops, sorry, local state is our state at this local pointer position. And if this is not a value, we want to have the initial state that we get from the function call. All right, so this can go, this can go. Good. And now if we want to set the state, we need to not overwrite the whole states and then update the state at this pointer position, which is local pointer equals new state. What's the matter here? Any is not assignable to type never. No, this is never. This is wrong. This is any. Nice. Okay, now it knows what we want. And here we return only the local state now and not the whole state anymore. All right, so now if we try it, oh, it's still not working. And this is because on each render, we basically need to update our pointer back to 0. All right. Oh, it's still not working. No. Yeah, of course, after this, we need to increase our local. So for every use state call, we need to increase our pointer, right? So we're not always on 0. This makes total sense. All right, I think now we did it. Oh, it's still not working. No. Actually, I think we need to move this to the end. It's still not working. God damn it. Live coding, right? Let me just check real quick. What is the problem? Oh, yeah, this is absolutely correct. Nice. At least one guy is paying attention, I guess. All right, so you can see now we can change the values independent of each other, right? Nice. You can also like change it like this and be happy, right? Yeah. That's a nice cat, right? It's a nice cat. Yeah. So actually, this is like almost like a fully functional React app now, and we didn't even use React. Nice, nice. Yeah, but you can see like this is like handling state is a bit complex. You don't really want to write it yourself, right? It gets a bit weird, and this is not really performant or proof or whatever. So don't do this at home. This is just for learning purposes. But yeah, like we implemented React and like it's cut some lines here, and we are back to 100 lines, right? This is full-fledged React. Nice. So I hope you learned something from this. Basically, what I want you guys to understand is JSX. It's no magic. Everything that's happening here is just function calls with a nicer syntax. So basically, every tag here is basically just a function call to react.createElement with like div and h1 and p, and maybe app. So nothing else is happening. This is just fancy function calls with a nicer syntax for writing HTML, basically, or views. Let's say views, and yeah, everything else is working as expected. We have our class main here that we still rendered here, which is working out of the box. We can just style it if we want. Yeah, so everything's just working, and that's basically the first part. I guess now it's a good time for questions before we continue with our deep dive into more state. Yeah. So any questions? Okay. So this is actually also important for later. You see that we call useState here twice, right? So the pointer is basically 0 here, and then it's 1 here, right? So our first state is with, which is at point 0 or position 0. Have is at position 1, and then we're basically done. But if we do the next render, if we don't reset it back to 0, this would be 2, this would be 3, and then it would use the default value again. So we need to reset it back to 0. And there's like one important thing here is that for every render, the order in which we call useState has to be the same, right? If we have like some, like, I don't know, some weird if here, which is sometimes true and sometimes not, this would probably break, at least if we have like more state underneath it, right? Because the order gets messed up or something is missing and it's not at the same position anymore. So this would probably break, which is bad. And this is like also a requirement of the real React use state is that you cannot use it in loops or ifs, like in conditionals. Like the order has always to be the same, which is like really one important thing to note. And this is because like React has to map it internally into some data structure and needs to, preserve where it was. So this is the one important thing about hooks generally. It's not only about use state, but all the React hooks So this is a hook if you didn't know. Has to be in the same order, not in conditionals and not in loops. So this is important. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah. The rendering or what? Oh, here. Yeah. No. Yeah. Like this is just plain JavaScript. So the idea is that everything, if you put it in rounded brackets here, right? This is just JavaScript code. You can write any JavaScript or TypeScript code that you want, and it just gets evaluated like normally. Like this is, yeah. Like if we would call this manually with the, yeah. So if we, yeah, we would basically do something like this, like create element image, right? And then our props are basically source, and then we would just do this, and maybe we can like not do it in comments. Oops, sorry. So this is basically just another syntax for this, right? And this is just JavaScript and it works. So you can use, you could also do like, I don't know, like true or something like this. This also works, for example. I don't think it works in our example because this is like a bit more complex. But in React, you can do something like this. Like conditional rendering, for example, is done with this idiom, for example. Or like false, I guess. This is something that evaluates the false. Then you render this, for example. Like, yeah, something like this. But this is just plain TypeScript, everything that's in the brackets. So yeah, there's no special syntax for interpolation or whatever. It's just plain. It's the same here, right? This is also just JavaScript. Ah, cool. Now we can. Right. Any more questions? No. So I guess we will take like 5 minute break. Can be back at like 53-ish. Uh, yeah. So this is, oh, let's do 54, whatever. Okay. Yeah. Also, if you have like more questions, just ask now. I will be here. Actually, I'm gonna need another water. Yeah, someone asked if I can share the code. I will put this on GitHub after the talk. Yes. Yes. No. So what exactly is the question? Oh, I mean, you could just delete everything that's here and just import React, and that's it, basically. I mean, we could probably do this, and then switch to like a full-blown React thingy afterwards. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We could actually try this after the break. It's actually I haven't planned this, but it's a good question, I think. Yeah, yeah. I just read it. Yeah, maybe I will just swap to different cats while we wait for the last minute. Should have added some of my cat actually. Oh, this looks like mine. Nice. Yeah, 420, 420, 420 plays it. It's Georg cat. Wasn't the ink? Yeah, it took me like half an hour to figure out how I could make this work with some URL that's not obvious fake. What? Yeah, yeah, I was happy with that. Yeah, yeah. Actually, I think for like the real world, we should actually use Place Kitten, and then it's back to working. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's fixed. Georg is gone. He was a good man. Okay, we change it back. I will change it back before we push it to the repository. Anyway, um, so yeah, the question was, what do we need to do to, have this run against real life React and not our not so nice implementation? So we could actually try to do this. This is not planned, but I guess it works. Um, so what we can do is basically just add React and React DOM as a dependency. Also, it doesn't really matter what version this is. I think hooks were introduced in 16.0 maybe it's a bit later, but I think if you use anything above 16, it's fine. So if it's 17 or 16, it shouldn't really matter. We only need hooks. Yeah. And now this is in the dependencies. We start parcel again. Where is it? This one. And then we can say we want React and we want React DOM. No, not Doom. And now we can basically just take everything that's here and just, don't use it anymore. The only thing we still need is the first render of the app, which is this call. Oh, and our root, I guess, which is here. And now if we reload the page, it's not working. Oh no, why is it not working? This is the one change that I said earlier, that actually React uses capital letters here for the onChange event. Oops, no, I don't want to save this. I want to save this. And it's still working. And now we're actually using React. Unbelievable. So yeah, that's it. So actually now I guess we can just stay in this. I wanted to do like a new project, but I guess we don't need to now because we have React. So nice. Yeah. Oh yeah, it might be a good idea. Yeah. Anyway, next topic, state management. So maybe we should first answer the question like, what is state, right? And state is basically data that changes over time. So, user inputs, API calls, I don't know, maybe some IoT devices give you more data. And so state is basically your data that changes over time. And because it changes over time, state management is usually very hard to do, right? But it's also very important. Like if you have good state management in your React app, the rest of it just falls into its pieces naturally, kind of. Not always, but it helps. It really helps with the general architecture of your views and stuff if your state is correct and nice. And there's also like a problem about state, which that state management is kind of over-engineered because it's a hard problem. A lot of people try to solve it, and maybe your state isn't even that complex, but you still use the tools which is meant for like more complex state solutions, right? So try not to over-engineer it too much, at least. Because if your state management is complex, your view also gets kind of complex. So it goes hand in hand, like the view and the state management. And I think that the most important thing to know about state management is with what kind of state you're actually dealing with. Like there are different types of state in your app, and you should know which is what, so you can decide better what do you actually want to use to manage it. And for that, I made this nice little graph. And there are basically two bigger parts in React. One is the UI state, which is everything related to your actual view. But this is no business logic. But for example, like a dropdown, if it's dropped down or not, is UI state, right? Or if you have a modal dialog, if that is shown or not, is UI state. And a smaller subset of the UI state is basically component state, which is just relevant for this one little component, like a button if it's hovered or not, or if it's or a drop down if it's drop down, or expander, which is keeping track of if it's expanded or not. So this is just local to the component. The whole UI doesn't really care about this. This is just component based. And on the other state, on the other side, we have app state, which is like your business logic and your business logic state, right? And you could also split the app state into two parts. One which is a client-specific state. So this is basically state that only lives in your browser, and you don't really want to persist this, at least not on a server. And actually, it turns out that most React apps don't have a lot of client state. So this is usually just a really, really small amount of state. It's mostly like, I don't know, you're logged in user, for example. This is client state, right? And then we have server state, which is everything else that lives on the server, like all the data you get from APIs that's persisted in some database, maybe some IoT devices that send you data. So this is everything that lives there. And this is usually like the hard part to solve, right? And in this table, these are the tools that you can use to manage this state. And for your components, your iState, you can use the React hooks out of the box. This is the one we used earlier, the use state. This is the most simple one. Then there's also context, which we will talk about in a minute, and reducer, which is basically the same as use state, just a nicer API if it's a bit more complex. I also have an example for this later. And you can actually also use like the React out of the box tools to manage your client-side state if it's not too complex. You don't need like Redux or MobX just to handle your currently logged in user, for example. So you don't necessarily want to use those libraries because it adds a layer of complexity to your application, right? And if you don't really need it, don't use it. That's my thinking there. And for the server side, since this is usually a bit harder because you have to think about caching, preloading, prefetching, state invalidation so the data don't get stale. I don't know, like reload if the window gets focused again, so the user always has like the newest data, right? So there's a lot of problems to solve. Also, like your API may not be stable or your IIT device is not always in range, and sometimes the request doesn't go through or it throws an error, right? These are all problems that you have to solve when you think about server state. And there are some nice libraries for that. The first two ones, they work with any backend, basically. And Apollo is specifically for GraphQL servers. But you can also use, for example, SVR for GraphQL. This is up to you. Just evaluate the tools, but they're really good. I would probably use React Query if I had the REST API. It has the most features and DevTools and everything. Apollo also have DevTools and everything. It's also really nice. I used it before, but it's only for GraphQL servers. And you could actually you don't need to use this. If you have just like one API call, you probably don't need to use it. You could use like the React hooks or Redux or whatever, but it's usually more boilerplate that comes with it, right? You have to handle some errors and latency, stuff like that, timeouts. So you have to handle this your own, and you have to write some more boilerplate code to get it working. But you can still do it. Nothing stops you from actually doing this. But if it gets more complex, I would introduce a library for that. All right, then more examples for the different kind of states. So UI state is like theming, like your current color theme, dark mode, light mode, all the colors and stuff. That's UI state. Or like modal dialogues. If a modal dialogue is shown, what's the result of that? Stuff like that. This is probably almost always UI state. And then we have like component specific state, which only lives in the component, like drop downs, if it's drop down, expander. I already said this before, I guess. Tab groups, the selected tab is component state. And then you have the client state, which is something like you're currently logged in user, like short-lived notifications or like snacks or whatever. And routing is also client state. And as I said before, this is mostly it usually. There's usually not more, except if you have like some apps that have a lot of complex client state. And apps I could think about would probably be like visual designers where you can track components around on a canvas or whatever, build and paint something, or like music composition where you have different instruments and tracks. Or like, all of our favorite Scribble is probably a lot of client-side code because it tracks all the painting and stuff, right? So this is probably not sent to the server, but it's tracked in the client. I'm not sure, but I think that's how it works. So this is more complex, and you have to use some libraries probably for that. And as I said before, server state is basically everything that lives on the server or talks to an API. Yeah. Also, like one thing, maybe actually like client state and UI state, sometimes it's hard to distinguish them. Maybe modal dial or maybe notifications could be argued that it's also UI state instead of client state, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. The difference is minor. It's just, you have to, the other parts are more important. And let's see some more examples, I guess. So yeah, since we want to push this code, I want to do a new React app. If you want to get started with React and don't want to do everything yourself, there's something called Create React App. I hope you can read it in the terminal. Maybe I will do this bigger for now. It's called React App. We can do like state examples, the name of our project, and then we want to do template TypeScript because we want to use TypeScript. So this sets up a new app with React and Webpack, all the stuff. It's basically ready to go. This will take a while, I guess. It's not that important anymore. Can I actually do this? So oh shit, did I kill the terminal now? That would be really bad because it was installing all this stuff. Let's see, maybe I broke it, maybe not. We'll find out. So while this is still installing, oh, okay, it's done now. We can just talk about what's actually scaffolded here. So we have like a tsconfig, package JSON, all the normal stuff. And we have like a source folder with some of your main app, some small CSS and a nice React logo. It also has something which is called Web Vitals, which is kind of new. If you don't know what it is, don't worry about it. Just delete it or let it in. It doesn't really matter. You can just, switch it off here and it's good. Yeah, don't really worry about it. We don't need it. Yeah, also like React strict mode. Don't worry too much about it. It's basically the same as JavaScript strict mode, just a bit different. We don't really care about this. But this is like the main entry point, and you see we still have the DOM render and get element by ID. It's basically the same what we did before, and we render our app here. So nice. We just leave this as is, and we start here. I can actually start this Webpack server. Let's see what's happening. So this will be on another port. So bye-bye cats. You will be missed. Yeah. Okay. So this is now a React app. This is the default page, and you can see like test stuff like hot reloading. So if you change something here, it's totally not working here. Nice. I don't want to fix this now, but we don't really care about this. So let's delete this because we don't want this. So state. A nice example is always, like a counter component, which is nice to teach the basics of state. So we have a counter, if user clicks a button, the counter increases. If he clicks another button, it decreases. That's what we want to implement. So let's do it. So we have like a count, right? And we need set count. And we use state again. No, this was not what I wanted. This one, it's 0 at the beginning. We want to render like a button. When we click it, we want to decrement the value. It has a minus sign. Then we will render the count. And we want another button. Click it. We want to increment. Now we just need to define increment and decrement. If we increment, it's basically just a function that uses set count to increase the value. And decrement, just the same. Nice. So now we can render our counter example, and I hope it works. Yes, that is absolutely correct. So you can see, best counter, nicest looking counter ever, right? It's awesome. Yeah. So what's happening now, basically, each counter, or we can actually do two counters to demonstrate something else too. So we wrap this in a div, say counter 1. Don't know why the live reload is not working. Anyway, so but you can see we have two counters now, and the state is actually separated. So even though the state is defined inside the component, it's not like static. If you come from an object-oriented, background, so the state is not static, but it's bound to the instance of this specific counter, and you can change it separately from each other. Yeah, so this is basically just simple stuff. Are there any questions about this? Yes. I hope not. No. Nice. So yeah, but now the question is like, what if you want to access the state from this counter inside a new component, which is called, for example, count display. So you want to display the count from this counter somewhere else in your app. Doesn't matter where, but you have to access it, right? So we start by doing something like this, and this just renders a div. It says count is some number. Just say 0 for now. And we render it at the bottom here. Right, so you see, if you change something here, it doesn't really matter. This is still 0 because we hard render it. What we want to do is we want to pass in the count that we want to show as a property inside this component, and then we render it. So, but now the question is also, IDE is smart enough to know that we need to say what the count is somewhere. So the question now is, what? Oh, I need to enable any, or disable any. So it's not, I have to restart Webpack, 1 second. Don't want to define all the types. STDs. Right, now it's happy again. Yeah, so now the question is, how do I get access to this counter's state so I can pass it down here, right? And the basic, or the answer almost always is to lift state up. That's how it's called. And what does that mean? Well, we basically just remove this here and put it into our state instead. So we lift it up a level, right? To the top level, basically. And now we can pass the count in here. And now we can also go and do like count, this count, and set count, or on change, or whatever you want to call it, is then set count. And now we also need to define the properties here in our counter, so it gets the count and change event. And here we do on change, change. Counter 2 has to disable for the moment. So now we see that our state now lives inside the app, not in the counter anymore, so we can freely pass it down to other properties, and it's kept in sync with the display component. So this is like the most simple example, basically. But now what's up with counter 2? Well, the problem now is that if we pass down, let's just duplicate this line, I guess. So if we just duplicate this and say this is now counter 2, they always have the same value, right? Because we only have one state now for count and set count, and it's not like implicit component state anymore because it's passed down. So if you want to fix this, we basically have to introduce like a second state here again, and then it works again. But yeah, this is like the downside of lifting state up, that you have to split it manually again if you want to use multiple instances of the same component. So now if we update the first one, it changes the display. If we update the second one, nothing else cares about it. And we're good. And now basically if you want to go back the other way again, right? Now let's say our count display wants to always output something different, something random, like this. We don't really care about the count anymore, so we should replace it, remove it, sorry, from our props. So we can delete this and we're good to go. And now one important thing is we could keep it like that. It works, right? Nothing is really like this changes funnily on every re-render. So, but the important thing is that it's always important to keep your state as close to the component where it's used as possible, at least in my opinion. So if you do some refactoring like this and you actually see, oh, well, this count is always passed down to this component and nowhere else, maybe I should move it back into the component itself, because it's not actually doing something here. It's just, you know, it's on the wrong place, basically. So you can copy this up again, change this again. And you can remove this again, and maybe the same for here. So yeah, and this is called basically co-location of state. So basically try to keep the state as close as possible to the actual component that uses it, because it makes managing it easier and refactoring and everything. So yeah, really do that. Also now one nice thing that maybe some of you guys didn't expect is that when I click the plus now, you can see that my random value isn't changing. And this is basically what the smart re-rendering of React does. It detects like the state change is only in the first counter, right? So it only needs to re-render this part of the app, nothing else. So this count display is only rendered once. Doesn't matter how often I change the state. It doesn't matter. It's only in this local component. And before that, it was on app. So every time we changed the state on app, the whole app re-rendered, and then the count display re-rendered, because if a component is re-rendered, all the children re-render, and then the random value was updated every time, right? So this is really important, and yeah, nice to know. Any questions so far? No. Nice. Maybe I will show you one nice trick, which is sometimes useful. So, I mean, this is just a function, right? And this function gets executed a lot of time by React. We can actually just log every time we render. So if we click here, so basically every click is a new re-render of this function, right? But React knows basically to keep the state in sync with this instance of this counter, even though it's basically just a function gets executed every time, again and again and again. And now the question is, like, if you want to reset, for example, the state to 0, how do you do that? Or you basically just want to reset the whole counter instance, or tell React that our new component or our component changed somehow, and you want to have like a blank component again. And it's not actually easy, because React keeps track where the component is, and it's always the same component for React, but it's basically a new one every render. So we can do this, for example, with the key property. Oh yeah, also wait, let's do something fun and actually give this a title. And this. Move this again. And this is my counter, not my title. Looks ugly. So like that. So okay, now the title is part of our counter, right? And looks like this. Maybe we also want to like here. And now we might want to add like another state here that sets the title of this counter. Oops. So we use this here. And we want some kind of input here that we can use to change the value of this title. I'll change. All right. So now if you change the title, you can see that the value in the component changes, right? It's basically here. Also, you can see that the whole app is re-rendering again because our random count changes every time I change something here. But the state is still not changed. So even though we get other properties, or the properties change over time, the state still stays the same. But now if you can say like, okay, whenever I change the title, I want to reset the counter, for example, to 0. I can just add the key property, which is special to React. And it basically uses this key to keep track of the component. So if we change, or if we increase the counter and now we change the name, it resets back to 0 because if you change the key, this is basically a new component to React and it gets a new state and everything. So this is basically resetting it, basically. This is a neat little trick sometimes you can use. Yeah. Okay. Any questions so far? No. Good. Yeah. Oh, context. Right. We haven't talked about context yet. Right. So passing down props, you can sometimes, pass them down like different layers or a lot of layers. This is called prop drilling. And sometimes it's tedious to do that because let's say we have like some kind of like any random layout component that doesn't do anything really, just laying out stuff, I guess, and or wrapping it in some divs or whatever. We'll show this here. So this is basically just rendering like some divs or whatever, and then the children, or let's say like a counter. So now we basically need to pass down all the props for the counter, which gets like a bit tedious over time. So this is not. Oops, this is just layout, and now layout basically has a counter somewhere in there, but we need to also pass the title. But it's just children. Yeah, we don't need this. So yeah, this is basically called prop drilling, and this is just one layer now. But we could actually do something like this. Actually, oops, sorry. What's happening? Now it's working. And we have more layout components here. And we just use this here. So now we basically just, drill the title prop down one layer, another layer, until it finally arrives at the counter, which gets a bit tedious. And also, like, the layout components, they don't really care about this title. They don't need it for anything. It's just there for no reason except for that it needs to be passed down. And there are ways to avoid this. And one of the ways to avoid this is direct context. So to use that, we can go and say like, okay, like title context. It's a bit contrived, the example, I know, but bear with me. You can say, okay, create context. Default value is basically my counter. Maybe we can do it counter title context. Or maybe we just say counter context. Maybe we can keep the value in there too. We'll see. And now somewhere in our DOM, or not our DOM, in our component tree, we need to add the provider for this context. Counter context.provider. We can also give it a default value here, but we already did, so we don't need to overwrite this. So maybe I put this one more down. It's easier to see. So yeah, we can either set it here, the default value, or we set it in our component tree. Oh, it actually doesn't need a value. Oh, it actually needs a value. What? That's weird. Let's set it again. My counter. Or maybe let's do actually do it like that. Title. So now we want to consume this value inside our counter without drilling down, right? So we look at our counter here, and there we can see, oh, actually I need to put this up again. That's in scope. Counter context dot consumer. So we want to consume this value. And this is now a function which does with one argument title. And here we can do it like that. And now we can remove this one, we remove this one, we remove this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. And this counter, we don't care about it anymore. So now, if we change our title, our counter component still gets the updates, even though we didn't use like 4 layers of prop drilling to actually get it down to the counter. So this saves a lot of prop drilling if you use that. So this is basically now like some global state that you can consume individually in your components with this syntax. All right. And now maybe we want to fix our count here again, that it actually shows the count. Maybe we want to do that. And to do that, we can change our context. So this one isn't just a string anymore, but maybe we want a complex object which has a title and some count, and maybe some set count, which is a function. Does something eventually. Oops. One bracket is missing. Okay, so now we broke everything, which is nice. Let's do count, set count again on the top level. Just 0. And now our value here is title and count and set count. Did I call it like that? Yes. Yes. Another bracket. And now again, we remove the state from our counter, but we use actually the stuff from the context. Count, set count. So this also doesn't work anymore. It's not a problem. You have to inline it. This one, I guess. +1. And this needs more brackets. It's an object. And this is just TypeScript being a bit tedious. So this should work again, I hope. No. Sad. It is a function, so it should actually work. I actually haven't prepared this, by the way. This was just an idea I had just a few minutes ago, and I regret it. No. Yep. Oh, God damn it. Yeah. This is... Everyone does this error. It's good to see it. It's yeah, now it's working again. And now we can use our consumer again in our count display. And we only care about the title here, right? Not the title, sorry, the count. So we don't need anything else. And we just say count. And one bracket is missing. And this bracket. And now we're good. Nice. And now it's back in sync. So now we basically just use context to store our title count and stuff like that. And now it's actually like kind of global, but the nice thing about context is that you can different contexts in different subtrees. So I guess we could just do something like this, and let's do more diffs. Diff always helps. So basically what I want to show here is that even though like context is kind of global, if you have different providers and different subtrees of your component tree, it's still not what I expected it to be. Like this should actually be different values, but it's not. Oh, because it uses the same. Yeah, sorry. Oh, back to count 2, I guess, and set count 2. And so yeah, now it's basically split again. Yeah. So if you nest different providers, the last one always wins, basically. So you need to have like different subtrees basically. I can just show you and just have like two providers here, which doesn't really make any sense. But now they use the same value again, right? Because this one uses count2, set count2, this one too, and now they are basically broken again, or not broken, but in sync. So yeah, that's basically everything about context. You can basically use it to pass down properties into your sub or into your Tritron without prop drilling, which is really nice, especially for stuff like theming, for example. Theming is always like the best example. Like you define a theme at the top level of your app, and like some buttons need your theme, right? And you don't want to pass it down your whole component tree. That would be really, really, really bad and tedious. So that's a good point where context comes in. Or like your currently logged in user, you can store it in the context, and every component that needs access to the user can just pull it out of the context again and be good. There's also like some hook syntax for this, but I don't want to talk about it. It's quite easy to learn. Just Google it. It looks a bit like use state, but it is basically like use context. So yeah. That's it. What else do I have? Oh yeah, one more thing about context. Just like with state, you want to co-locate your context to where it's actually needed. So a lot of React apps look like this, where you have like, well, they probably have more, but you have like a user provider, which is like your context for your user, a theme provider, which is a context, for your theme, notifications provider, which stores some notifications, and then like your router, and then your routes. But maybe some of those things don't need to be global. For example, the notifications. Maybe they don't need to live at the top level because you only need it in the dashboard, for example, right? Or your user, maybe you also need the user only in the dashboard, but not on, this is actually, I forgot to change this. Say settings. Like the settings screen and the home screen, they probably don't need to be in user context. And then what you can do is basically just remove user provider and notifications provider from your top level and pull them into your dashboard. So it's basically co-locating context with the views that actually need them instead of this is also, sorry, this should be screen, oops, and screen. So yeah, just try to co-locate context with the components again, just like state. It helps with maintainability. And last but not least, then we are done, is the reducer. Reducer is a bit like for complex state, it helps managing complex state easier with a nicer syntax. Let's say you have like a list of to-dos, right? Initial to-dos, it's one to-do in there, and the idea is to learn React. And you haven't done that yet because you're here. So, and now we want to modify this list in different ways. Like we want to say like, okay, I completed this to-do, mark this one completed, or I want to add more to-dos, or I want to remove completed to-dos, whatever. And how this works is basically you create this reducer function, which we talk about in a second, your list of to-dos. And what you get back from React is basically the modified list and the dispatch function. And what the dispatch function does is basically it takes an action. So basically, what do you want to do? And changes the to-dos accordingly. So let's say we want to like, add a to-do. Our payload for this action is like the new to-do. So you might want to learn Vim too, which is always nice. And maybe you want to complete the to-do after this talk that you learned React, right? That's the basic idea. And then the reducer function looks like this. You get your state and your action, and you want to return the new state, basically. So what the reducer is basically state, action, not action. And what you get back is new state. This is all it does. And basically what we do here is, okay, we see what type of action do we want to handle. If it's add to do, we take our payload, which is the new to do, and just add it to our current state. So basically what this does is basically just I don't know if you know the syntax, but we basically add done false to our new to-do. Or this could actually be to-do. It makes it more readable, I guess. And then we add all of our existing state at the end of the array. And we have a new array with one more item. If we want to complete a to-do, we get the idea from the payload. So payload can be anything, basically. You can type this nicer if you have time for it in TypeScript, but this is how I done it. It's just any. So this time it's the ID that is the payload. And then we map all of our states, check if the to-do is the same as the ID that we gave in from our action, and we just set this to completed. And if not, we just return the to-do. And if it's an unknown action, we just return the state. Delete function just filters everything that is not the same as the ID we get, stuff like that. So this is way nicer than modifying or using like the set to-dos, for example, and do this every time you need to change something. It's basically just code capsulation in a nicer way. Also, if you know Redux, this is basically the same as Redux, just without a store, basically. Yeah. So yeah, so much about that. So if you've got interested in this, you can just look up the docs. They're really good. And thanks for listening. This is too big. Oops. I will put the slides and the code up to this GitHub repository. You can just scan this QR code now if you don't want to type it up or whatever. Nice. And that's it. Yeah. Thanks for listening, I guess. I hope you learned something. I hope it wasn't too hard. Yeah. Thanks for listening. Oh, yeah. Sure. Questions. I actually haven't used 17 yet in production. I can't really answer that. Yeah, sorry. But just a second, I'm gonna make the repo public. There's one thing, like if you have like problems with your performance in React, there are usually like a few steps you want to check first. First one is how much do you actually re-render on changes? Like depending on where your state lives, maybe the whole app re-renders on every change, which is bad, right? So you want to check that. If you use the React DevTools, you can actually like, I don't know if I have them here. No, I do not. Maybe let's get them. Oh, I can't get them. God damn it. I have to use my this does not work. Okay, let's do it like that. So if you have DevTools installed, you can go to the settings here and say record by each, not this one, highlight updates when components re-render. And then you can basically see the more red it gets, the more often this component re-renders in a specific amount of time. So if I spam this button, you can see that also like my whole app is re-rendering every time. And this is not really performant. You can optimize that also. If I change the title, the same is happening. So this is like the first thing you can do to see what part of your app is actually re-rendering, because this is usually like a big performance issue. There's also a profiler in the DevTools that you can use, and I actually haven't used this much. I'm not that good at it. But you see how much each render takes, basically, and you can probably optimize there or see whatever takes the longest to re-render. So in our case, it's the counter, but it's still quite fast with not even a millisecond. So you can start to analyze slow components and optimize them. There are also some tools that help you with state man. Oh yeah, basically like if the component is still fast, then it's probably a state issue, and then you need to introduce like state management libraries to help you solve this. But yeah, I hope this answers it, kind of. um, so I haven't used a lot of Vue actually. I used it last month in a project in our organization. So a few things that I don't like about Vue is that it has some magic strings and a lot of magic somehow behind the scenes. Maybe it was because I wasn't really familiar with Vue, but I don't know. I just don't like having strings somewhere as arguments that call a function with the same name or something like that. I didn't really like that. I don't know. It felt weird. Um, Also, like the templating in Vue is different. You actually write HTML, right? And you have like different syntax for conditionals and stuff. You have like this weird attributes that are actually code that if you have an if or a for or whatever. So you have to learn like this extra templating syntax. That's basically what I mean. And in React, you can just use plain JS. Like everything is basically JS, right? You don't have to learn something new. If you want to iterate in your component tree, you just use a for, like a normal JS for loop. And also like React is pretty functional, like, functional components and stuff. And I kind of like functional development, or I have a very functional coding style. So this basically suits me better than Vue. Also, like you can use React for basically everything. I think it's the same for Vue. But as I said in my intro, I have done a lot of different stuff. And yeah, you can, like, if it's web-based, you can use React. There's no limitation, I think. Maybe WebGL, or if it's like, maybe some weird Canvas app that doesn't make really sense because that's a different DOM API and React doesn't really help you with that. Or if it's like super 3D, you want to probably use WebGL or Three.js or something like that. But yeah, if it's anything else, it's probably good to use React, or you can use React for that. Let's say it like that. No, no, it works. It's just private. I'm just doing it now to make it public. Uh, yeah, I forgot to do it. Like it's not pushed yet, and it's private, so I forgot to do it public before the talk. I'm just doing it now. Just need to enter my password. Make public. Yeah, feel free to ask now. So it really, maybe I need to do it even smaller. I tested it, it worked on mine, but okay. I got you. Can't do it smaller than that, sorry. But yeah, now the link should also work. I made it public, but there's nothing there yet. So yeah, I'm pushing this after the talk. Works on my machine. I don't care. It works for me. Yeah. Yeah, I will push this soon. Cool. both.